Oh, hi there. Welcome to Country Crocked. I can't believe it's not better. Before we jump in, here's a quick note about this episode. Today we're going to talk about cancer, addiction, panic attacks, childhood sexual abuse, and domestic and emotional violence, and a whole season of life that felt like everything was falling apart. So if any of that is tender for you right now, please take care of yourself while listening. Now, Kendra's going to share some of her personal experience with alcohol in this episode, and that experience is hers alone. Addiction is complex, serious, and deeply individual, and nothing here is meant to minimize that reality. If you or someone you love is struggling, we've linked support resources in the show notes. Okay, enough chit chat. This is episode 8, Domestic Demolition.
Good afternoon, Ange. How are you doing?
Oh, good day, Kendra. How are you?
Good, good. I know you're doing baseball with your son, right?
Oh, yeah, now I'm the baseball mom. Today was the opening day for, 2026 Little League, and, I picked my spot with my lawn chair under the tree out by the third baseline. I took your advice, and rolled with it, and, I was happy as a clam out there on the hill.
Oh yeah, you have to stay away from the baseball crowds because otherwise, like these parents. I mean, God bless them, but they all think their kids are going D1, and it's just you want to shake them and be like, let them be kids, let them have fun.
Gosh, there was it was cute, like, all the boys were out there having a good time, but, like, the pitcher on the other team, I don't know if he's on HGH or what, he's like a 10-year-old John Roush. I was like, "Did anybody check this kid's birth certificate? What's going on here?"
Right? It's fun. Some of them are good, and then you'll see them all like tap out when they're like 13 and they can't swing a bat after that because they had their highlight years in their little league.
Come on in and grab a seat. There's no better place to be. Two Midwestern Gen Xers emotionally stunted. Subtlety was not part of our upbringing. So here we are in all of our glory, country crocked. I can't believe it's not better.
So, last week we talked about our 20s and, how our 20s equaled survival, busyness, numb, and we were distracted and we kind of suppressed the trauma down. And it wasn't a bad busyness, it was a good business. We loved being moms. We loved being, we loved being married and stuff. Our 20s weren't about blaming our spouses. It wasn't blaming our kids, our careers. It was literally like you talked before about our nervous system reality. That's all it was, and that's why I want to make sure that everybody knows that we weren't saying, oh, it's because of this, this, and this. We were suppressed. No, it's our nervous system. It's how it works. I going into 30s, I mean, it's hard because that's the crash out.
Oh my god.
What when did you first realize something was shifting emotionally?
Gosh, I don't know where to start, like, my 30s were kind of a shit show, and yeah, I'm gonna be really honest with you, Kendra. Like, I've been kinda dreading this episode because, we've talked before and, I know we're not doing the trauma Olympics over here, and we tell our listeners don't compare trauma and stuff, but, my 30s is when I started to feel really alone. And, you've always been a rock and you've always been there for me, so that's not an indictment on you, but, like you were fucking going through it, and I didn't want to dump on you. And I'm thinking, like we all just kind of felt siloed in our problems. But, my 30s kinda if my 20s were about, moving out of my childhood home and starting a life, and, that was kinda like the Navy decade, if you wanna block it off time-wise. So then, like, my 30s, it was a total life change, like, all over again. It's like every 10 years, my life resets, and we started off, we separated from the military. We're going into civilian life, moved all the way, from one coast to the other coast. And so, if it's not explicitly clear to you guys, Kendra and I are from the middle of the country, like the Midwest, and like I just keep getting dispersed to the extreme corners of it with my military travels. So, like in my early 30s. again, like, nothing was really attributed to trauma or anything. It was just the hustle and bustle of, moving around, like, kids, growing pains with marriage 'cause, ma like, that doesn't come with an instruction manual either, you guys are
Absolutely
kinda
not.
figuring it out together. But, my dad died when I was 32. And, I don't wanna get into that a whole lot 'cause I think we should spend a good hour talking about when my dad died and how that was kind of a shift in our dynamic. But you're asking, like, what was kind of the catalyst in my 30s? My dad died. He died when I was 32. I went out and buried him. And, at that point, I didn't have clear visual memories or recollections of I remembered the physical abuse from both parents. I remembered the emotional abuse from both parents, but, I couldn't pull up like those fragments of memories because, really in my head, they kinda only existed as nightmares, and, like, that's why I never wanted to go to sleep. Like, you talk about, carrying those memories with you your whole life. Like, I had the luxury of not realizing what they were during the day, but like just being terrified of going to sleep and just waking up in a panic and a cold sweat. And you know what it's like after you've had a bad night of sleep. Like, it throws off your whole day. So like I almost feel like my if my 30s were a day, it was just thrown off by a night of bad sleep. And, that's when I really started exploring, um, where those nightmares were coming from and what that meant. What was your wake up call?
Yeah, I think the age 32, I think it's like the trigger year. It really is not when you're 30. It's when you're 32. When I was 32, I was diagnosed the first time with breast cancer. And, you know, you're used to the numb game. So you hear that, oh, you have cancer. I went numb. I went numb and I tried my best to um just think on anything but what I was being going through. And I was for me, I made the mistake. And if somebody's listening and you are either being, first diagnosed with something and you're at a young age, I'm so sorry that you're having to go through that. But don't make my mistake. The mistake I made was I distanced myself from everybody that I loved. I disconnected. I disconnected from my husband. I mean, I was there for my kids, but I was disconnected mentally from my whole life. And it was because in my mind, is if I die, it won't be as sad for everybody if I just disconnect. Well, in that disconnecting, there's a lot of alone time. And in that alone time, you do, like you said, you feel lonely. You have to face things. And it all like, the kids are getting older and they're reaching an age, the age that I started being abused. And so that triggers it right there. I'm like, and I have both my kids are wanting to go spend the night here and there. And I'm just like, no, you can't. I didn't want them around anybody because I didn't trust anybody. So I'm dealing with cancer. I am trying to distance myself from my family mentally, and just doing that caused everything at once to come crashing. And I literally, at between 32 and 33, I spiraled out. I literally spiraled out mentally. And for me, those were probably the two darkest years of my entire life. Um, I don't remember a lot. I really don't. Like sometimes if I ask questions, to my husband, I'll be like, or he'll talk about stuff and I'll be like, I don't remember that because I had literally disconnected myself to that point. And, that's what triggered it for me. And I knew right then and there. I remember waking up, I think I was 33. And one morning I woke up and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't live like this. I've got to seek help. I've got to quit trying to disconnect from the people that can help me. And I've got to face this head on. And you were just starting to ask questions. And it was
That
just,
wasn't a good time for you, was it?
No, it was a great time because it was like I finally had you to talk to about some things. And like I said, I've always treaded lightly. I've always treaded lightly until, the past few years. Now that everything's out, we don't tread lightly. But you were starting to ask the questions, and it was like, okay, I finally can talk to somebody because I didn't feel comfortable talking to my husband about it. Like he knew about it, but I could see him clam up,
Right.
just like any man in the right mind would clam up.
My
And
God, Jimmy cries sometimes, and
yeah,
bless his heart, like I've never felt so supported and validated, but then I almost feel bad. I'm like, "Oh God, I don't want him to cry," like I gotta
yeah,
keep this
right.
to myself.
Yeah, and then you feel like you have a friend, you'll have you're like your close friend, and you're almost on the verge of telling them everything, and then it's that going back to that shame episode where you're just like, oh no, I can't. I don't want them to see that part of me. So you're literally fighting it on your own again in your 30s, just like you almost feel like you're back in your, preteen years where you're just like, oh, I'm all alone again. I've got to deal with this. And was it, during my 20s? Why didn't I think about it? And it's because we were busy. And again, I want to re-emphasize that there's no blaming our children, blaming our spouses at the time that, it was their fault that we suppressed something. It was just our nervous system suppressing it. We were in survival mode. We were in family mode. So yeah, that was what it was for me. Um, you know, and another question is, what were the early signs for you that the past wasn't as doormat as you thought it was?
There were a couple of things. Um, the first one was that, my 20s I spent working on my bachelor's degree, working on my master's degree. I had my Navy experience, but, I wasn't immersed in corporate America yet. Um, when we separated from the military and moved, that's when I really started my career. So, that kind of became, I don't want to say the focus of my 30s, but like the new driving force of my 30s. Like this was the new challenge to conquer. So I still had my existing responsibilities and hobbies and people that I love and those relationships, but like the new challenge or like the new direction of the 30s was to build up my career. And I kind of noticed in my early 30s, I don't want to say I was struggling with it because I've always been really good at my job. Like I've always been really smart. I'm fast. Like I'm good at what I do. Like I pick stuff up. But man, do I not do well on performance reviews, and it's always, like, really confusing because I get, like, that year-end performance review, and it's like, "Oh, man, like, you're sharp as a tack," like, you run circles performance-wise around everybody else. And just give me all these accolades about, basically how I'm a little Angie robot just busting out the work. But then they're like, "But you could button up on your empathy," or, like, "You could stand to be nicer to people," maybe your work's up here, but, like, your attitude's kinda here, so let's work on that, and and, I don't know if it's the neurodivergence or, like, what it is, but it's frustrating for me because, I was a gifted child, I coulda skipped 3rd grade, I was ace in state test, they had me I don't know if you know this, I was at the college, like, doing computer programming in kindergarten because they didn't have a gifted program. Like, people just assume when you're that smart, that, like, you could excel in life, and that ain't it, man, like, we used to say, like, book smart, but not street smart, like, "Ho, ho, ho." Well, hey, guess what, guys? Like, a lot of times that's neurodivergence, like, that's what that was. But, so people would laugh and pat me on the head all the time, like, "Oh, bless her heart. Aren't you pretty?" Yeah. But then, like, they would never tell me, like, what the right thing to do is, right? They're like, "Oh, sweet Angela, bless her heart," then I'm like, "What am I doing wrong?" So, like, that started, like, the frustration of my early 30s. But, like, I kinda got a reset, like, I kinda got a reset in the middle of my 30s, because we talk about, the 20s being sleeper agent trauma and raising the families and stuff. Well, like my older kids are now, hovering around 10, 11 years old, and my ex-husband and I decide to have 2 more kids. And like they weren't oopsies, they were planned. And we both decided that together. We were out of the military and he had missed a lot of time with them growing up just due to deployments and stuff, and, you know, you and I used to babysit our cousins all the time, like, Kendra and I are, like, number 2, number 3 age-wise in our family, and so, like, we were the little mothers, and we were babysitting every day.
Yeah.
Like, I loved babysitting or like, I loved being the junior mom, I felt like a little mommy, and they were my
Yeah.
cousins, but I felt protective over them. So, like, I had 2 more kids in my mid-30s, and it let me hit that pause button on the trauma again, just like in my 20s, because all of my energy and all of my focus, like, went into just loving those little babies. I messed up because, there were 2 other babies there, that needed me to, like, pour that love and attention into them, and, like, I did a bad job with it. Basically, everything that I wanted as a kid is what I tried to provide for my like, the things I didn't like about my parents, like, I didn't do with my kids, and the things that I missed from my parents are the things that I tried to do with my kids, and, I guess I realized at the end of the day, like, just because I wanted it from my mom doesn't mean, like, every kid wants that, and, that is the humbling realization that, like, I'm coming up with,
Well, yeah,
so
we overcompensate. We overcompensate for what we lacked or what we felt we lacked. And I think our parents tried to do that. I mean, I can talk from about my mom. My mom tried to do that. I can now looking back and knowing what her childhood was like and how it wasn't good, you know, I see where she tried to compensate and be a better mom. But, unfortunately, my dad left when I was 6 and she became a single mom and had to work 2 jobs, sometimes 3. So there really wasn't any time for parenting. And then, the mental health stuff was not offered like it is today. If you had mental health issues back then, it was just like, you're a vampire or, like stay away, something's wrong. Um, so I completely get the overcompensating with our kids. And, I wish, well, we can apologize. I mean, we can apologize on this podcast. And I know that you give them the chance to apologize. And I'm going to get apologize if, my kids say something about it. I'll be like, hey, I'm sorry if you feel that I did this, but this is why I did it. And it's not
well,
an
yeah, dude,
excuse.
tell me right now because, like, that was
Yeah.
the next question I was gonna ask you, like, let's use this platform, because we can't always have that conversation with our kids because it does feel like we're being defensive, but, like, the kids aren't the audience of this, like, other
No.
survivors are the audience, so tell them, like, give them the perspective, "Hey, man, I was trying to do this, but it actually looked like this," and maybe
Yeah.
some of these
Oh,
men and women can
absolutely.
relate to us, because like we said in that first episode, we're not we didn't win, we didn't slay all day, like, we messed up
No,
bad.
we messed up. And here's the thing, like I said before, if our children choose to become parents, I'm for I told both my kids, I support their choice of having children or not having children. I will always support whatever they choose. Of course, I want grandkids one day, but it's not about me. But like I told them both, you're gonna mess up. I promise you, you're going to mess up. And your kids are gonna hold something against you that you have no idea is being held against you until years later when they're adults and they feel necessary to tell you or
Or
necessary to
maybe my
react to
mom will
something.
post about it on Facebook or something.
Yeah, maybe your mom will post about it on Facebook. There's things that we suffered, and especially in our early 30s. So I can only speak for me. I know Angela went through some stuff in her mid 30s that she can talk about. But for me, it was panic attacks that nobody knew about. Nobody knew about the panic attacks that came at 30, and then at 32 being diagnosed with cancer. I even kept that from my close friends. My close friends didn't know until afterwards. Um, and some are just now learning, but like my really close ones, my ride or dies did not know about my panic attacks.
Well, what does that look like for you? Is it like that, like, "Oh my god, am I having a
Oh,
heart
yeah,
attack?"
it was a tightening of chest, like, there was a couple of times I laid in bed and I'm like, "I'm too young, I can't I'm not having a heart attack, I go to the gym, I work out, I do all these good things, I eat right." It feels like you're having a heart attack, and you literally I would have to get up and just and I realized after a while what it was, and then when I went to the doctor and he said I had anxiety, and the anxiety came out of nowhere. Like, it really did. Like, I knew I probably suffered from it in my 20s and in my high school years, but it was never like, it wasn't talked about. So you just are like, oh, this must be something wrong with me. So for us and for me in my 30s, it was panic attacks, it was anxiety, it was a numbness. Like I told you, I detached myself in my early 30s. I detached myself from my family, not like physically, just emotionally. Um, and not just my own household. I mean, my mom, anybody, and some of my friends. Like, I didn't talk to my couple of my friends. Like, thank God I had one friend that was like, I'm sticking around. You're not getting rid of me. I know what you're trying to do here. So for me, it was numbness. It was a rage that I couldn't explain. Just 1 minute sitting there, fine, and then something triggered me, and it just and it was a rage. And sometimes my kids witnessed that rage, and oh, I have the biggest regret about that. It was feeling unsafe in certain situations, even in rooms of people I knew. I just felt it was a weirdness. It was just like a
Like, you
weird, like I
couldn't put
didn't
your
feel safe.
finger on it or
Couldn't put my finger on it. And then, I had a difficult with intimacy, with my husband. And then, I had emotional flashbacks.
I
And it
get
was
that.
like and you're connecting those dots all over again that you never wanted to connect again. And then you got the shame that spirals. So that's in my early 30s. I don't know if you can relate to that, but if there's a young audience listening, and you're finding out that your mom or dad was sexually abused, and maybe in their 30s, they were in their 20s, they were the great parents, but in their 30s they kind of got a little wackadoodle. It's because it comes crashing back. We own it. I own it. I've owned it with my kids. I've owned it with my spouse. And we'll talk later on here in this episode, as like I told you, 32 and 33 just it was terrible. My marriage was, struggling. I was not the parent that I needed to be. I'm trying to deal with a disease that I'm not mentally accepting, and then I'm also trying to reconnect, or not even reconnect, just rely on a faith that I've kind of put by the sideway, like when you put your Bible on a shelf and it gathers dust. And that's where I was. I didn't really want to hear the preaching. I didn't want to hear, and my mom, I mean, she preaches at you too. And to this day, I kind of like it now. I didn't like it then. So that preaching gets on your nerves, and then that just kind of aggravates you. But you realize you're fighting a demonic force, and it is just constantly attacking your mind, and it does affect the choices that you make. How did your 30s differ from your 20s anxiety for you?
but, my nightmares were starting to ramp up like I talked about. I was hearing things about the truth was starting to come out, but not it was trickling in. It didn't come in all at once. Basically, people were waiting to see, like, what I was gonna say. Like, "What else you wanna tell me, Angela? What else you wanna" and I'm like, "Well, what are you looking for? Like, tell me what you're looking for, and I'll see if that was very frustrating for me. So I kinda constantly felt like people were relying on me for an investigation and almost mad at me for, holding up the investigators, like I was sitting on a pile of evidence or something. So, like that made me feel very angry and hurt, especially from my mother and other family members, basically acting like, "Why are you defending," like, if you're not telling me these things, you must be defending your father. Like, why would you be defending your father? What are you getting out of it? Did you like it? Like,
Yeah.
all of this, like, it's so weird and obscene. So, like, I'm dealing with these feelings. I'm dealing with like the career struggle. I'm growing apart emotionally from my ex-husband, and we didn't have the tools in our hands at the time to be able to converge again. And I'm so glad, you and Justin were able to kind of work through just the shit that comes with cancer and treatment and the strain that puts on any family. Like, I don't envy that at all. But, what I really noticed was that I was just starting to be in physical pain all the time, and, like, that was almost like the confusing bell that was going off. Like, why am I constantly in pain? And it's not like I did have some various conditions that I relayed with you, but it's like this generalized pain, and it still happens that, like, I lay down at night and relax, like, when my mind turns like, when I'm able to relax my mind and stop thinking about stuff, that's when my body's like, "Okay, now it's time to pay attention to me," and I lay in my bed, and everything hurts, and everything's on fire, and everything's throbbing, and I can't understand why. So it's like an attack on the body and the mind. I can see my marriage dissolving. I can see my older children like, I can see all of those things, and it scared the shit out of me.
I mean, did
Like,
you feel like you were falling apart though too? I mean, I know like the things around you were falling apart because I know for me they were, but I felt like I was falling apart. Like, and maybe not experiencing pain or physical things as you did. I mean, I had physical things going on, but it wasn't like cause, you know what I mean? It wasn't from trauma or from abuse. It was from a disease that was trying to take my body. But I felt like I was falling apart. Like, and I
well,
didn't feel like I could be put back together.
I didn't feel like I was falling apart, I felt like I was losing control,
Okay,
and I
yeah.
I think that's you know, we both need that, like, that's both of our trauma response in one way or another, like, we both need to be in control, but it manifests a little differently, but, like, that's the core complaint of, like, both of us, I think a lot of times is just feeling completely out of control, and, like, so my late 30s, I was just losing control, and I didn't know how to fix things, and so I very frantically was try we had this whole episode about why are children silent? Why are these children silent? I could see, I could see that my kids weren't talking to I could see that other people in my life were and I could see that these relationships needed my attention, and I didn't know how to fix them. And I did the confrontational stuff. Like you and I are very direct with each other. And that's kind of how I've handled relationship like, my close other relationships in my family. Like, hey, I see something's on your mind. Like, hey man, like let's talk about this. Let's fight about this, and then when that's not going well, just like the desperate escalation and the snowball and the panicking and like, why won't you talk to me? Like, why aren't we and that's how I pushed my family away. That's how I pushed the people who loved me away, by just being terrible, terrible, terrible at emotional regulation,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and I can relate to that. I really can. I think I did the same thing. In some cases, I did. Maybe not to the extent. I might went a little bit of the opposite direction where I just literally like blocked everything out. It was almost like a blackout. It was like almost literally like a blackout. Because I'm in my 20s, I'm thinking, okay, I'm strong, I'm fine, I survived. I don't have to talk about this. Even if Angel doesn't remember, I don't have to talk about this. I am perfectly fine. And then
Kicking
when I,
ass and taking names.
yeah, that is one of my favorite things. I always tell my kids and everything they do, kick ass, take names later. But that's a side note. But and then I hit my 30s and I'm like, oh, I didn't process it. I didn't process it, I start grieving and that's where, I've said this before, the root cause of breast cancer is something, that you're harboring against your mother. And in my 30s, the relationship between her and I, because in my 20s, I had a really good relationship with my mom. She was there for both the births of my kids. I mean, if you want to talk about the definition of a grandma or what a grandma should be, and I do feel like my mom was this because she felt guilty about not being it for me. But my mom was the epitome of what a great grandma is. She still is. And so I have to constantly remind my kids, will you please call your grandma? Will you just please call your grandma? You know, or take, and my son's really good about it. He'll take turns. He'll pick a day. I think he does it once a month. He'll call all the grandparents. My daughter, she's like her dad. They don't like people, period. I mean, they like people, but they don't, I mean, they like people. Let me rephrase that. They like people, they love people, but they just, when they're done for the day, they're done for the day. Um, but I was in my 30s, I'm grieving a childhood all of a sudden that I felt I didn't get and deserved. I'm angry at the caregivers, your mom, and other people in our family. I'm rewriting family narratives in my mind, and this is stuff I didn't do in my 20s. I'm trying my best to break generational patterns, and so I'm doing all of this as I'm fighting cancer, as I'm disconnecting from the people that love me, and I'm making poor choices. I mean, 32, 33, I made some really poor choices. I got back into drinking, and I was drinking heavily, and I think that's
I
why.
probably would have too.
Yeah. Well, I think that is why I don't remember a lot of the things. Like the kids and Justin will tell me, "Well, don't you remember we did this?" And I'm like, "I don't remember." And I feel horrible. It was like, literally for a year of my husband and my children's lives, I don't remember. And a lot of people don't know this, and they're going to hear this for the first time. Um, you know, I was literally an alcoholic, and I just I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel because it all came back, and it reminded me when I was, 15, 16, and I'm hiding alcohol underneath my bed, and it was the only thing that could just, even if it was for, 6 hours while I pass out because I'm so drunk I'm passed out, or I black out. I was numb. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to feel it. I didn't have to nothing. And then, 34 came, and it was like, I call it, a spiritual slap in the face. It's like God just said, "You know what? I'm done
Feel like
here."
he
Like,
drop kicked you.
yeah, like he drop kicked me and said, like, "What the hell are you doing?" I mean, God did not say that, but like those words, but it was basically is like that,
It was the vibe.
It was the vibe I got. Like, "What are you doing? What are you doing, Kendra? Wake up. Wake up." I've always been a person, I can cut something off cold turkey. Never had a problem with it. Never, like, I don't understand, like, how you can become, like, I never looked at, like, marijuana as a gateway drug, and I never did anything outside of marijuana, maybe a couple shrooms, but nothing else. But I didn't have an addictive personality. I could always switch on a dime. And I guess that's a good quality, but that's what I did. It's like I woke up one day at 34 and said, "Devil, it's enough. I can't live like this." And, I finally had you to talk to, and and then I forget what year, I think it was 2014, the stuff with mom happened, and I almost spiraled back out of control. And that was when you were my rock. And for those that don't know, my mother was abused, in very badly, her broken into. That's her story to tell. But, you were a rock for me. If I didn't have you, like, and you didn't just carry me, you carried my mom through that. And you did the things that you were the daughter that I couldn't be. And you actually, and I don't know if you know this, but I learned from you in that moment, you know, and especially now that we're talking, I learned, like, here I am holding all this anger towards my mom. My mom's going through this crazy time.
You can't be
And
angry at her during that, that was heartbreaking.
you can't be angry towards that, but you showed me, like, "Hey, this is what I needed to be." You were the example of what I needed to be. So, I appreciate that, and I'm telling you today, I don't think I've ever told you, but thank you, not for just helping us through that time emotionally, physically, mentally, all that, but you demonstrated what a daughter should have been, and you did what I couldn't do at the time, and I thank God for that. But that was, at 34, I was a wake-up call. And, we'll talk about my later wake-up calls, my spiritual wake-up call, but for my family, it was like on switch, And I was like, "No, I can't do this no more. I've gotta face what happened to me. I've gotta own it. This did happen. My uncle sexually abused me for years, and he sexually abused my cousin. I'm not going to hide this anymore. We're gonna get this out." And, that's kinda when I started talking to my husband about it. I mean, he knew about it, but not in detail. And it was just so good to finally get it out. And it was healing. And, shortly after I quit drinking, and I haven't touched alcohol in a long time, and never do I plan on it. So that was kind of, how the 30s went. Did you start seeing your childhood differently in your 30s, like as you started remembering stuff? And how was your tolerance towards certain family dynamics? Like, did it change?
I mean, I just think as more stuff was coming up, I made over adjustments or compensations or overcorrections, whatever you wanna call them. Like, basically, like, I was starting to remember how bad we had it terrible,
Right.
and, like, I've been trying to be unemotional you know, about our stories and just, like, laying out the facts and not overlaying a lot of opinion. But like, it's been a bad week, and, like, Kendra and I, like, had a real, like, Will Smith, Chris Rock, like, "Keep your wife's name out my mouth" moment. You know, I'm annoyed, but like, this is an
Right?
annoying week for me. So as I'm remembering all this stuff, and I'm able to kinda process it and think about it, I'm like, "Oh, man, like, that was wrong. That was messed up. I didn't deserve that." Like, let me give my kids all the things I didn't have. And, and it showed, like, this is what love looked like to me. And, like, this is where I'm trying to relate to the listeners, and just say, like, hey, maybe this is where your disconnect with your kid is. I as a teenager, just wanted my parents to leave me the fuck alone all the time. Like, I wanted to listen to music in my bedroom. I wanted to talk on the phone with my friends. I didn't want to have anything to do with my parents. And that was probably because of the trauma and because they were abusive, but I didn't think about that when I was parenting my kids. I just assumed, like, oh, well, kids don't want their parents to bug them. Like, kids want their parents to leave them the F alone. So I where I thought, maybe I was giving my older kids some space, like, I was giving them too much space, like I was focusing my love and attention on the babies. And what I think it is, it's so embarrassing to say this, like, I love babies, love babies. But, is it that the babies, like, so freely receive love, and, like, they never push your like, yeah, I'm kinda talking through this right now. Is that why we love
Yeah,
babies?
no, I think that's what it is. I mean, like, they are just that they look at you with the unconditional love that you search for, and that you search for your whole life. I mean, I don't know how it was. I mean, I do, because I remember you telling me, when I was born, how the world just changed and it became light. And that's how it was for when Olivia was born. It was, I'll never forget it. I mean, of course, both kids are, and I have to remind my kids even today, they are 22 and 19 years old, and I have to constantly remind that my love is equal, because my son will tell me privately, he's like, I'm your favorite, right? And then
That's what
Olivia
my
will be
son
like,
says.
yeah, and Olivia will be like, when her and I are by ourselves, she's like, I'm your favorite, right? I'm your favorite, right, mom? I'm like, no, I don't have a favorite. You are all loved equally. But that firstborn, there's something about the firstborn when they come into this world. Our world has been dark up until this point. Yeah, we've had some fun times, but it's really, we've never felt a love where somebody loved us the way we needed to be loved. And I think
I've
that
told
was your connection. Your connection to the babies was, and that was my connection to the baby, was I looked at her, and the world stopped, and I felt that love finally. And then there
God, I
comes,
still feel it,
yeah, and you
like,
still feel it until, and then they go their teenage years, and you're just like, "Oh my god, I don't think they love me anymore."
well, and
But
that's what I felt like, and, like, I was
yeah.
almost, like, so embarrassed, like, well, how you get in relationships where you're like, like, "He doesn't want me," so almost like you, like, get defensive and, like, you're a little colder and, like, you're not as
Yeah,
open anymore because, like, your feelings are hurt. Like, I did that with my and they're just kids.
and they're
Like,
just
I had
kids.
I had no reason to be huffy and like, I shoulda just kept giving them that love, like, whether I felt like they wanted it or not, 'cause, like, that's how I felt, and God, I love them so much. And, I've told my daughter repeatedly, she probably thinks I'm full of crap, but,
Oh,
I
good.
I
We
told my
are. At some
well,
point, some stuff we are. I know I am on some stuff.
I said, "You are the love of my life." Like
Absolutely. They
like,
are.
all 4 of them are the lo I said, "I will never love a man the way I love you." Like, never. And I know you love your husband, but,
Yeah.
it's between your kids and him, like, he can
Well, actually, and I have a weird concept about that. So, Justin and I, and people, I think we said it to his mom one time and she kind of looked at us weird. It was his mom or his sister. I forget which one. But, we were watching a thing. I don't know if it was Maria Shriver. It was some kind of talk show. And she had asked like these parents, these loving parents. It was an episode about parenting. And she said, so she looked at the wife and she said, if it was your child or your husband, one had to die, whose life would you save? And her answer at first, when she gave the answer, I was kind of like shocked, but then I was like, I agree with her. She said, I would save my husband first. And that is
so it could
true for
help you
me too.
save the other kids?
No,
Oh, okay.
that wasn't the reasoning. It was because without him, I wouldn't have them. And that's what it goes for me is, and I would not want my children. I think we would be stronger, not even stronger. I don't want them to ever have to feel loss. And that's why we would probably break. I know we would, but I wouldn't want my kids to feel that brokenness of losing something. So I thought that was always interesting. But no, my kids, I'm like you, Angela. They're my world. I could not imagine, and it's a different love that you have for a spouse, for your children. Like my kids, I love my husband. I could say I love him unconditionally, but that's not true. I love my kids unconditionally. Like
Right.
there's just nothing they could do that would ever, ever stop me from loving them.
Well, that's
And
the sad thing. I
yeah,
don't think all those kids know it. Like, I don't think they
no,
realize it.
yeah, I don't,
There's
I
never
mean, they
gonna be a
do.
situation, like, where we
I think they
push them.
know. I think there's times in their lives where they felt maybe we didn't love them as much. And listen, I remember our teen years, our college years. There were times that we felt the same way about certain people. We're struggling. We're trying to find out who we are, and that's what they're doing. They're struggling right now. They're trying to find out who they are, and sometimes we fit the mold, sometimes we don't. And as good moms, you got to learn when you don't fit the mold, and you just back off for a minute and let them figure it out. And I've had to do that a couple times, but like that love, it's so crazy how much, you know, your I will say my children, of course, God saves us, but my children saved my life. They really did. They kept me sane and they kept me feeling wanted, and they still do to this day. Just a hug here and there, it lightens up my world. Even at, my 19-year-old son will hug me before he leaves out of town. And I'm just like, oh, it melts me. And I do have that same love for my husband where I want to love him unconditionally. And I'm pretty sure there's nothing he could do to make me stop loving him.
Right,
But it's
weren't you only at,
different.
like, 99.1%, which is
Yeah, it's not
like, did you
90,
have,
it's
like
99.9. It's 100 with my
okay,
kids. Yeah,
alright.
it's 100 with my kids. It's just a different kind of love. It's that, and I know my husband could tell you that too. I watch him and he just the love he has for our children. And that's what I wish, not wish, I know that they know it. But I always try to drive it home, and I've got to learn to back off. I'm always trying to say, I want them to feel this love that I have for them. I'm
"Why
getting,
don't you feel my love?"
yeah, why don't you
Yeah,
feel my love? in certain situations. And
And they're like,
sometimes that
"'Cause your
can,
love is scaring me, mom." You know, like,
yes,
that's what
yes.
your love is this love doesn't feel like love, it feels like fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think why
I
they
call you
think
like that sometimes. Like, "Why don't you love me, Kendra?" And you're like, "Girl, you gotta just shut up."
I don't say shut up. I just tell you to be still.
Well, okay. Alright, so that's the Kendra translation, folks.
No, I just I want our kids that to feel that love, but like in our 30s, like for me in the last part of my 30s, it was an amazing turning point. It was the relationship I was getting, with them that I never thought I could have, and it was nice. It was like, the switch flipped. Justin and I are on the same team. We fought hard for our marriage, and I'm gonna give him a shout out too. I mean, that man is a saint, to be able to put up with me and the craziness. I mean, I put up with some of his stuff too, don't get me wrong. But no,
I
he
think he
really
just really likes those lines you vacuum into the carpet. He's like, "I'm
I don't
never
have
gonna get
carpet
another wife that
anymore.
does it."
Yeah, don't have carpet anymore. So it's kind of
Oh.
nice. But he was a huge, rock towards in that beginning 30s. And a lot of men walk away. They walk
Right.
away when the stuff comes out, or when tragedy hits the house. And a lot of women walk away too. I watched that, and a
Or
lot
the women push him away too.
or the women
That
push him
happens.
away. And I did. I tried. I tried pushing him away, and I'm so thankful that he said no. I'm fighting for you. And that, for the first time, I told my husband, I am better now with our marriage. I like our marriage now better than I did before. Like, I wish it was like this the whole time, because after getting cancer at 32, almost losing our marriage, and then choosing to fight and choosing to stay, like, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is how this is going to go. And that's how he was. And he became a rock, he became everything. And I fell in love with him more than I ever did prior. I mean, I always loved him, don't get me wrong. So if he ever listens to this, I loved you, that's why I married you.
I
But
never heard you bring up another man's name, in the
yeah,
45 years I've
I
known you.
remember telling my stepmom, and she can vouch for me, that we had broken out for like the second time. I've known my husband since I was 17, and we had broken out for the second time. We were cleaning horse stalls. And I told my stepmom, I said, I'm going to marry that man one day. And I'm sure in her mind, she's like, oh, okay. I was 18, 19 years old, and I married that man. And no, so I'm grateful for that. The second part of my 30s, when did you realize, for you, because I'm going to say 34 is when I realized that, it wasn't me breaking down, but waking up. When did you realize that for you, that you weren't, it wasn't you breaking down, like your body hurting or coming against you, or some other attacks coming against you? When did you realize you weren't breaking down, but you were actually waking up?
I never reached that point in my 30s.
Okay.
My separation started when I was 38. The divorce was finalized when I was 39. I did relocate with 3 of my children, to the other side of the country, and it was very hard on my children making that move, and that was traumatic for them. Not only were their parents getting divorced, but also there was a huge physical separation from their father, and despite my reasons and perspective for that, that's not something I can share with my children or other because it's private and it's related to my own healing, but, that healing journey, you know, didn't didn't go as planned, it didn't follow the schedule or the trajectory that I wanted it to, and my kids, unfortunately, I haven't wanted to talk about my 30s because it's the fucking demolition decade, it's where I came in, Kendra came in like a wrecking ball, and we
Yeah.
were Miley Cyrus, holding onto that chain. It's not that I couldn't see it happening and I wasn't like, I could see it, and, like, I wanted desperately to fix it, but, unfortunately, that hasn't been until the last couple of years. What I started to realize in my 30s and what I'm fully realizing now is that the way we mothered, the way we overcorrected, the way we overcompensated, we knew it came from a place of love. Kendra, I know you love your children. I I support you in the way you raise them and the circumstances that formed those relationships. What I want to impart on the listeners is our children didn't share our experience. They didn't have our childhood trauma. They didn't have our lived experience. So even though our parenting came from a place of love and a place of correction, since they didn't have that background, they didn't have that perspective. So what we were trying to do in the name of love and safety just felt like danger, urgent, instability, chaos. Like that's what it felt like to them. And so like when you're equipping kids with armor they don't know they need, like that armor doesn't feel like love. It just feels like something heavy that they have to carry and they don't know why.
I like the way you put that. I really do. I think that's absolutely, you know, it's the facts, it's the truth. And I'm proud of the mom you are and the mom you're still trying to be. I'm jealous that you have 2 young ones. I'm glad I don't have 4 kids. God knew that he gave you the 4 and only me 2. But I think, you're still doing it. You're still kicking butt and taking names later, even amongst, the stuff that you're not able to talk about. And I am proud of you for that, and I am so proud of us. We came in like a wrecking ball, but we rocked that wrecking ball way better than Miley Cyrus did because we destroyed that wrecking ball. Because we're not regressing. We're still just processing. Even today, as healing, our healing never ends. And that's why we have to make sure that listeners understand healing doesn't stop. It will continue. We'll continue to heal. And you're
Well,
never going
sometimes
to
it
be,
rolls back a little bit.
yeah, and there will be days you'll take 5 steps forward, 6 steps back. But know that not until the end, when we enter, if you're a believer, your goal is, for living forever with Christ. That is when perfection comes. That is when the ultimate healing comes. I'm not saying you can't be healed here on earth. I'm just saying it's going to always be a process because there's always going to be, like we talked before, triggers. You know, delayed trauma, now that we're talking about 20s to 30s, I want people to understand delayed trauma is normal. It is normal to delay the trauma, and it's normal to, a lot of people that I've talked to, and I have a friend that does counseling, and the stories are very similar. In their 20s, they started their families, they shut down, and 30s is when it hits. Like you said, coming in like a wrecking ball. Now that song's gonna be stuck in my head. And healing can look messy. My
Right.
early 30s were messy. I reverted back to being an alcoholic. And my rage, be, and I didn't realize rage was actually grief that had nowhere to go. And when somebody told me that, a professional told me, that's why you get so angry. Because I thought, maybe I'm just a mean person. Because, like you said, your end of the year reviews, people are saying, because, I've never seen a mean side of you. I think you're just friendly. And I know that, I have a strong personality. But it was so nice to finally hear not an excuse, but like, hey, your rage was actually grief that
Yeah, I
had,
got people who
no
think I'm
place
the
to
witch
go.
of Endor over here.
And to me, that's crazy. And if you are listening, you're allowed to reevaluate family relationships. Angela used to think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but every time she would come back home, I would make her either come visit me, or she wasn't going to see me because she would
She's like,
want,
"I ain't going over there."
yeah, she's like, let's do a family. And I'm like, I'm not going. And now she understands why. But, we're allowed that. We're allowed to reevaluate those relationships. I've had to reevaluate my relationship with your mom. I haven't talked to your mom in years. And I'm going to put that out there in case she ever does listen to this. I love her. I absolutely love her. I feel sorry that there's something in her that's broken that needs fixed. And I hope one day she gets it fixed. I hope that she genuinely gets her healing from whatever has hurt her. And I know you love your mom, and I love my mom. And, our relationship, it is a lot better. And because I've had an example, I've had an example because you show me that every day. Angela has a more, and it's weird, but she is probably closer to my mom sometimes than I am. I know she talks to my mom way more than I do. Um, my mom will get Angela on the phone for 2 hours. You're lucky to get me on the phone for 20 minutes, and that's like max for me. And I appreciate that because you've shown me, and you've had to correct me on some things, which I appreciate because you've shown me how really special my mom is and what her past is like and what your mom's past is like. And that helps. That helps me.
Yeah, I wanna kinda make it clear for people because Kendra and I have been kinda tiptoeing around this subject. I spoke about not being in a speaking relationship with my mother, and Kendra just said she hasn't spoken to her in years. That's not on us, like, that door is open, the communication isn't coming, from my mother's side, and so that is why I've been very restrained on this podcast. I'm not here to flame spray my mother, I wanna present the facts, and, actually, Kendra, as we've been talking through stuff, like, I've been able to figure out lot of stuff, and so yeah, this has been really good for me, and that's why I want you listeners to keep, sharing this podcast with other people because sometimes you just talk through this or hear somebody else talking through it, and you're like these little light bulbs are going off in your head. But, the reason I'm not flame spraying my mother is because I do want a relationship with her. I love my mother, like, I long for that relationship, that's probably what gets you mad at me all the time, like, just longing for that relationship, and, my friends bust me for that too, like, "Why are you seeking love and validation from these people?" But, like, I see a goodness in her, and I see a hurt in her, and, like, I want so badly for her to address that hurt, I think she broke when my brother died and just never put those pieces back together. So, listeners, I encourage you, if you're a survivor of childhood abuse or these strained it doesn't have to be abuse, like you could just not get along with one of your parents, and you could be feeling some kind of way about that. What I want you to know, I'm going to say it again. You did not deserve that. You deserved to be loved. You deserved to be appreciated. You deserved to be protected. The relationship you had, the treatment you received was never about your worth. It was never about your character. It was never about who you were as a child. It has everything to do with what that other person was capable of giving you at the time. So listeners, like, rewind back another minute and listen to that again if you need to, but that abuse, all those sad feelings, that was never about you. And do not use that now to set your worth. Do not use that now to set an expectation for what you deserve in a relationship because you never deserved that. You never deserved that. And it was always about them. And so, like, that's what I think about, with my relationship with my mother. It's not an indication of my worth. It's not even an indication of how much she loved me. It was an indication of what she was capable of giving at that time. So I hope and I pray to God every day that she has a reckoning, that she has an awakening, and she doesn't have to call me and apologize and prostrate herself, like, I don't expect any of that. If my mom were to call me or, like, if my one of my kids ever were to say to me, like, "Hey, I don't think some of these things went well. I want to have a relationship with you, but it's gotta be a different I think that's the adult way if my mom called me up tomorrow and said, "I wanna have a relationship with you. I recognize that it has to be a different relationship." I'd be like, "Yeah, let's go. I'm on board." Those would be the magic word, like, it doesn't even have to be an apology, an acknowledgement. I understand that this has to be a different relationship.
I agree. They come from a generation, her and my mom. And they come from that generation where you don't talk about feelings, you don't talk about what's ever happened, you brush it underneath the rug and it stays there. And, what I wish for them, because they didn't have a good childhood either. They did do better than their parents in some aspects, and some aspects not so much. But if they were able to talk it through, even the two of them together, Angela and my mom, I really think there'd be 100%, not 100%, but that 99.9% healing process. And it would be unique to watch them and have them understand how beneficial it is. You're laughing. Why is this?
Well, you're gonna get mad at me. It was just the Angela brain. You were saying something really serious, but, when you're talking about, like, them healing, I just pictured you're gonna be so mad at me. I had, like, this little visual of, like, the Fembot from Austin Powers, just smoking and
You and your
exploding.
stupid movies. Literally. I
You're
I I
like,
don't know
"Oh,
when
oh,
you
oh,
have time to
oh."
watch such stupidity. That's why her and my mom get along, because they watch the most stupidest things, people. I don't know. That is, try to be lighthearted on here too. That is something that is so annoying about both of them. And, they're
I could
what
tell
I
you
don't even know.
why.
No, I don't wanna know. I don't know, because I'm never gonna understand you guys in that way. I'm not and I don't wanna try, and I don't need your and I know you get frustrated when people don't understand some things. Well, Imma tell you, I don't wanna understand it. I don't care to understand it. That is one thing you're never gonna get me to do, is understand why you and my mom watch stupid movies and have the humor that you have. Period. I love you both, though. It was a great topic today. I appreciate our listeners. We always appreciate you guys, and always know that when if you're listening to this in your 20s and you're thinking, "Oh, I've been sexually abused. These women are crazy. I don't feel like they do." Your 30s are coming, and it will be a crash out and a wrecking ball, and you're gonna feel like Miley Cyrus, if you even know who that is. But, we really truly hope that you benefit from this, no matter what age you are, if you've been abused. Angela, go ahead and pray us out.
Alright. Well, thank you, Kendra. I enjoy talking with you every week. This has been really healing for me, and I appreciate and love you. Heavenly Father, you know the homes we were shaped in. You know what formed us: the silence, the fear, the shame, and the striving. You know the vows that we made as children. We said, I will not do this. I will never become that. I will be different. Lord, some of us did not parent casually. We parented in opposition. We overcorrected. We tried to build safety where we once felt exposed. Where we were ignored, we tried to engage. Where we were humiliated, we tried to offer protection. Where we were physically beaten, we tried to stay calm. And where we were told we were not enough, we tried to overachieve. And sometimes our protection felt like pressure to our children. Sometimes our provision felt performative. And sometimes our intention didn't land the way we expected it to. So, God, we're asking you to hold the tension between intention and impact. Help us tell the truth without collapsing into shame. God, teach us what authority looks like without fear. Teach us what love looks like without urgency. Teach us how to live in the middle, not in reaction, not in extremes, but in wisdom. For those of us who were never given a blueprint, God, be our blueprint. For those of us still trying to calibrate in the dark, paint those lane markers clearly. And for those mothers who tried imperfectly, earnestly, and fiercely, remind us that reaction is not the end of the story. The healing is. Amen.
So here we are in all of our glory, country crocked. I can't believe it's not better.